guys, so in this video we're going to show you how to do the compaction testing or the Modified Proctor Test. We won't be doing the standard Proctor Test as it's no longer the standard for this test. The actual standard method of doing the compaction test is the Modified Proctor Test. In lecture I'll explain why we no longer do the standard test but do the Modified Proctor.
Alright, so the equipment that we need for this test is a 1/30th of a cubic foot mold, which is shown right here. So this is the mold and the assembly right there, and then place this part on the top. So this is what the mold and its inside will look like. This is the mold for the Modified Proctor Test. We need some water in a graduated cylinder. This is about 100 milliliters of water. This is our straight edge, which we'll be using for trimming the top and the bottom excess soil from the mold. We need to take various measurements of moisture content, so we'll be using these evaporating dishes. Multiple of those are needed for this test. And this is about 4 kilos of the soil that we'll be using for this test. We also need the number 4 sieve to sieve this material through. Obviously you'll see some very coarse particles, so we'll be doing the test on the material that would go through the number 4 sieve, and I'll show you that in a second. Alright guys, so this is the part where we get into some action. So this is our number 4 sieve right here. So as you can see, the openings of this are about 4.75 millimeters. So I'm going to place the number 4 sieve on top of that container, and we're going to grab that 4 kilos of soil that we have and place it on top of the sieve. And use a little brush to get all that soil down underneath. That's probably good. So the final product of our sieve soil would be something like that. I just do a little close-up view of this stuff. Right? So everything that you see here is obviously gone through the number 4 sieve. The next step is to add about 100 milliliters of water to this soil. So you'll try to spray it all around and then mix it all up with a scoop, or a spoon, and then actually with your hands too, to get it all nice and consistent. Playing around with soil for a little bit. All of the soil has the same amount of moisture before we start the test. So before we move forward, I actually also wanted to show you what the automatic compaction hammer looks like. So it's this green device that you're seeing right there. It has the capability of doing a set number of hammer drops. You can set that through the controller on the right-hand side of it. It has a safety at the bottom so that the hammer doesn't drop on your hands, and it's actually very important to put that in place. This is the safety I'm talking about. So when you would want to start the hammer, you would want to put the safety in this position so that the hammer can actually drop. And then whenever you're done with each step, you would want to put back the safety so that the hammer, if it had to fall down, would just fall on top of the safety. So this is the hammer itself. This is the hammer, and this is the Modified Proctor Hammer. So it'll have a drop height of about 1.5 feet or 18 inches. The hammer weight is 10 pounds. And when you're doing the modified test, you would be testing or putting in the soil in 5 layers. So those are the specs of the modified test. And you would do 25 drops for each layer. So you have to put this all back together. Just wanted to show you guys that. Alright, so the next step is to scoop in a couple of scoops of the soil into the mold. Usually I think about 4 to 5 scoops is probably enough for one layer. Although this is something that you can calibrate yourself by doing the first layer and seeing how much thickness it's giving you. That's probably a good amount to start with. I'd like to show you what this would look like from a close-up. So that's the soil inside the mold. And then let's just put it back. So the next step would be to remove the safety, set the number of hammer drops to 25, which I'll show you right now. So we have 25 hammer drops set, and in a minute you'll see what the hammer would look like when it falls down on top of our soil. Alright, so now that we have our first layer done, we put back the safety. Now is the time to scoop in a couple of more scoops of soil in there for our second layer and repeat the process one more time. So 2, 3, maybe 4 scoops is enough this time. This is our second layer. So again, remove the safety, set this back to 25 drops, and hit it one more time. So we got our second layer down. So again, we put the safety back on, add a couple of more scoops of soil. This will be our third layer out of 5 layers. There we go. Remove the safety and hit it again. that's our third layer. Put the safety back on, add a couple more scoops. Let's go with 2.5, maybe 3 this time. Right. Remove the safety. And reset. Do another 25 hammer drops. Right, so there we go, our 5th and last layer for this test. Remove the safety and another 25 drops. Alright, so we're done with the 5 layers for this test. As you can see, the level of the soil inside the container is higher than the line of the mold, and that's what we want it to be. We want to make sure that the 5 layers fill up the not only the mold area, but a little bit above that, so that we can trim some of it and then weigh it. At this step, it's necessary that we've measured the weight of the mold when it was empty, so there was no soil in it. Now what we're going to do is disassemble this and trim the excess soil from the top and the bottom, then re-weigh the mold with the moist soil in it to measure the mass or the weight of the soil that is contained in this. And then the last step will be to measure the water content using a jack, which I'll show you in a second. So now we're unscrewing the base plate from the compaction device, and we're going to be starting to trim off the top and the bottom using our straight edge. This process is very similar to trimming the specimen the same way that we did the expansion index test. Alright, there we go. So that is the top part, where we can again start from the middle. And so now in this part, now that we've removed the collar from the top, we have some excess soil on the top. We use our straight edge going through from the middle and going towards the edges to remove the excess soil. That's the motion that we want to keep. Got to be careful with this step so that you don't lose any of the soil that's compacted in the mold, and that you just get a relatively flat surface. It would be good to use a brush to grab the soil here on the side that's sometimes stuck, because you don't want to weigh that as part of your weight measurement. Let me just clean up here on this side a little bit. I'm going to be as precise as we can with this. So, done with the top. And now we can open up this part. And we have a nice flat surface at the bottom of this, which doesn't really need any trimming, although we could try to get some excess stuff off. Sometimes doing that can cause some particles to fall from inside the mold. So it's pretty flat. So what I'm going to do now, this is my final product right now. I'm going to go measure the weight of this for each test. Then the next step is to extrude the sample from the mold and get water content measurements out of that. Okay? Alright, so the next step is to extrude the sample out of the mold. So I'm going to use this jack system here that we have for this. So that's that. And then the next step is to push up the jack. To get moisture content, so if we lose some of the soil, it doesn't really matter because we've already measured the mass. So this is our sample that came out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this apart and grab a couple of samples from the top, middle, and the bottom of this. I'll show you a close-up of this just so you get an idea of what this looks like. So this is the close-up version of this, and as you can see it broke up through the middle. That happens when there's not a lot of moisture. In the next steps where we add more moisture and redo the test, we'll less likely see any of this breakage that we saw here. All right. So the last step is to grab our moisture content sample from this. So I have a moisture content aluminum can ready to go. So these were the compacted soils. So I'll grab maybe a little chunk from the top, or maybe a little bit more from that right there. Then I'll grab some more from the middle pieces and some from the bottom as well. So this is the bottom piece. I'll grab some of that. So you probably want something like this as your first sample. And the way that you do the water content measurement is to obviously weigh the can first, now weigh the wet soil that's in here, and then put it in the oven for 24 hours and re-weigh the dry soil to get the water content. As far as the material here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remix it with the other soils that I had. So with this stuff, so once we mix that, then we're going to add another 100 milliliters of water and repeat the procedure for a few times. We continue this process as much as usually up to 5 or 6 times. And what we want to see is first the weight of the compacted soil inside the mold to increase and then start decreasing. So once we start to see the weight to increase and then decrease, that is the time that we've done enough number of trials to construct a correct compaction curve and obtain the maximum dry unit weight from our curve and the optimum water content. So we're going to continue this for another 4 or 5 times and grab measurements of the weight and the moisture content each time.